I'll call the meeting to order, and I'd like to make the following statement. Beginning by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. Today with me on the panel is Maurice Terrien and Brent McIntyre, and our secretary today is Cara Belshaw. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. And could you please put your cell phones on mute?
Do you swear?
Affirm.
Please state your name.
Howard Lindsay McCubbin.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Rocky Newcomb.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Our first property on the docket is 996 St. Mary's Road. Am I correct in understanding that the issue is the amount of assessed value?
Yes.
Mr. Assessor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. File number 18-420, the applicant is Colliers International. The roll number is 080036695500. The address is 996 St. Mary's Road. The owner is CJL Holdings Limited. For the roll year 2019, with a reference date of April 1st, 2016, the current assessed value is $470,000, and I have no recommendation on this. I believe this value is reasonable, Mr. Chairman. Going further down into my brief, this property was actually built in 2011. It's zone C2. The land area is 3,290 square feet. The planned area is 1,975 square feet. And there is a basement area. However, it's fairly low but usable. It's not a full height basement, but I'll tell you that this business wouldn't be able to operate in this property without the basement. So there's some value attributed to the basement. There are freezers in the basement. There's some work area and storage for the catering business that occupies the property. It's not owner occupied, so there was an INE submitted to the department. First of all, it's my understanding that the original basement was used and retrofitted to suit the current structure that was built in 2011. So there wasn't a total demolition of the property. There was some remnants of the basement left there. The property was acquired by the current owner in on July the 17th, 2009. I'm referencing page 2 of my brief, Mr. Chairman. Sale price of $173,500 with a sworn value of $165,000. So that's essentially a land value because the building was removed. If you turn to page 4 of my brief, Mr. Chairman, you can see the way the income summary is structured. On the main floor, we have 1,975 square feet at $17.22 per square foot, and the basement, which is 1,125 square feet at $4.48 a square foot. I can tell you the overall rent when calculated based on the gross floor area, the overall rent would be $12.60. And that's referencing the $39,050 of the potential income. To that, we remove we have a vacancy loss of 6% and expenses for management, shortfall, and other, and we arrive at a total net operating income of $32,929. The capitalization rate used is 7%, and we have a capitalized value of $470,000 in total. Now, like I said, the building was constructed in 2011. If you turn to page 9 of my brief, you will see the permit that was taken out for the construction of the property. You can see that the declared construction value is $300,000. The total project value is $500,000. And again, I'm referencing the year 2011, Mr. Chairman. So that's the main permit, and so if we add that permit value, which it's been my experience that permit values are usually below the actual cost of construction, and that's a fact in every instance I've come across. And you add that to the land sale that took place in 2009, we have a total value of $465,000. Permit value added to the land value, $465,000 in 2009. We're dealing with a reference date of April the 1st, 2016, Mr. Chairman. I think as we move further into the report, an income and expense statement was submitted on page 10 of my brief. It's the start of that I&E. You can see it's ticked off as a net rent. It's not a true net rent because the owner is apparently paying taxes. So if you take the taxes off of $47,610, you're around $36,000. Our net operating income for this property is $32,929. So we're lower even than the actual net that's produced on page 10 of my brief. And the reason I'm not taking out insurance property management, because we're doing that in our income summary anyway. You can see that the overall it's not a true triple net, it's not a true net rent, it's a net rent, not a triple net rent. I would say that amounts that's reported to us is works out to $15.36. Overall, again, we're at $12.60. and that's my presentation.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes, I'm going to start with a couple of statements you made. You said they couldn't operate without without the basement. Those are your words. Now, where does this come from? Are you a professional catering operator?
No, I'm not, but I'm very observant, and I've been into many businesses, Mr. Chairman, and it's logical going into this property, they would have either have to have off-site storage or a larger building to accommodate the current operations that are taking place in this property. And of course, I'm not valuing the business itself, Mr. Chairman, but I'm valuing the use of the property and the actual market value of the property.
Have you inspected this basement?
Absolutely, I have, yes.
When did this occur?
This occurred a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
Yep.
And you said the sale was essentially land value. Where did this information come from?
Well, it's my belief it's land value. There was a structure on there that was demolished to some extent. The owner obviously wanted the land to build a.
Well, it's not obvious. We're here to provide testimony.
Right.
Tell me what facts you have that support that. Did you interview a vendor or a purchaser?
No, based on my experience, I would say that it's the values in the land with respect to that sale, Mr. Chairman.
It's your opinion, though. It's
Of
not-
course, we all
Okay.
have opinions,
Well,
yeah.
I probably should have said that in the beginning.
We all have opinions.
And you said that the permit and land value equaled a certain amount. Did you investigate the actual construction costs?
No, I didn't, but I did reference the permit value, and I did reference the project value of $500,000, Mr. Chairman.
So you didn't review these at any time during the construction process? Did you inspect the site?
No, I wasn't involved at all at that point in time, Mr. Chairman.
You, on page 1, are calling this a building 2011, but on page 9, your evidence indicates that the foundation was reused. So given that, why do you have a 2011 date? Shouldn't this be adjusted downwards to account for a reusing of the original foundation?
It would be a negligible amount, if any adjustment, Mr. Chairman, and I don't think it's necessary.
You don't think, but you're basing this on what?
Again, that's my opinion.
Okay, and without an inspection of the issues?
I have inspected this property, Mr. Chairman.
If the effective year of this property were reduced, would this change your assessment parameters?
If the effective year of the property, it depends on how much it was reduced, and I don't see any reason to reduce it.
No, I wasn't asking that, but your parameters do call for a change in their application based on effective years, correct? Did you know the original age of the foundation?
I don't have that information here with me, Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned the statement they provided, and in your calculation, and this is on your evidence, page 10, you chose only to consider that the taxes were an expense, so you're not considering that insurance is an expense?
I believe what I said to the board, Mr. Chairman, is that those expenses that the owner submitted on page 10 that would be below the potential income. I didn't say it in that many words, so I feel we would atone for that anyway in our income summary. I was essentially focusing on the net rent being paid, which was $15.36 per square foot. We're below that. We're at $12.60 a square foot.
You referenced a number of on the NOI of $32,900 and comparing it to the potential income, correct?
I believe I did, yes.
But they're not the same, are they? You did not account for a vacancy allowance or a shortfall or management or other, which are all the standard deductions. But the two numbers are not the same, are they?
Well, sorry, back. Can you ask me that question again?
You said that the 47,000 less the taxes was roughly 36,000, and you said that you were using 32,900, which was less than that, and that would account for some of the other costs. But that's not, they're not the same numbers, are they?
No, of course they're not.
32,000 is net after a vacancy allowance. And
Of course, yeah.
on your page 10, it shows that they didn't have a vacancy in this year, correct?
Right. This, Mr.
Those are my
Chairman,
questions then.
if I'm allowed.
Sorry.
This is a performer here, Mr. Chairman. This is a mass appraisal. If we look at the site specific, that's what I was referencing with respect to the triple net, the net rent minus the expenses that we would account for.
Okay.
Two
Mr.
different
McIntyre, questions?
No.
Mr. Terrian?
Yes, I have a few. Your comparables on page 3. Do you know if the comparables are similar buildings in the sense that a main floor job, or is that as well, is there other basements in there that are similar to this?
No, the property that's closest in proximity to the subject property is 978 St. Mary's, of course. And that is actually a main floor rent. And that's at $14.50 a square foot. That's an actual main, and this building, I might add, is substantially older than the subject property, and it does not show as well as the subject property. That's my best comparison, I would say.
Okay. Now you mentioned that the basement was not as high as the main floor. Do you know the height of the basement approximately?
The height of the basement, I'm 5'8.5" and the usable height of the I didn't have to duck, so I would say the usable height of the basement is 6 feet.
Okay.
6 feet.
Did you go through a door? Did you have to go through a door?
Oh, no, I went down, straight down in the
Okay.
basement and stairs in the basement. There was a door there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
And I see the mailer refers to 2,000 square feet as the leased area.
Right.
And that came up to I know you compiled at 1536 square foot. Did you have a chance to examine that lease? Or did you?
No, they did not submit the lease, Mr. Chairman. And I suspect they're just referencing the main floor area there because it's very close to our plan area of 1975.
Yeah, well, that's why I assumed as well.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure we'd know what the lease says. That would do it with some arguments, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's see, have anything else? Well, that's fine, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could you walk us quickly through your other comparable rents here?
Okay.
What's your commentary on them?
Fair enough.
General usefulness?
Of course, these are all retail rents. The one on 1250 Pembina Highway, and I might add, these buildings are all older. I'll say that out, in some cases substantially older. I don't have the actual ages here, but I know they're older than the subject property, which should be mentioned. This is a 1,200 square foot, and again, Mr. Chairman, these are all net rents. So we have a rent on Pembina Highway, retail use, 1,200 square feet, $16.30 a square foot. Of course, I would say that this property is in a better location than the subject property, or is similar, but they're fairly similar arteries, but I would say Pembina has more traffic in this vicinity. 810 Victor, again, retail use, $13.27 a square foot, and that's a 10-year lease starting in 2011. Starting in August of 13, a 5-year term, we have a property in St. Anne's Road, which again is a arterial route in the city. 2,500 square feet at $18 a square foot, net rent. And I mentioned 978 St. Mary's, which is the best comparison. I think it's the closest in proximity, obviously, to the city, to the subject, and it's substantially older than the subject property, and the actual, I didn't go into the building, but looking in from the outside of the property, I can tell it was in as good condition as the subject property. 810 Selkirk
Just
Ave.
before you carry on there, sorry to interrupt,
Sorry.
but the 425 St. Anne's, the 978, and the subject on St. Mary's Road.
Yes.
What are the cross streets near there?
Ooh.
Where are we talking about?
Oh, we're talking on St. Anne's, we're talking further down, I think past Firmer. Oh. It's just before Firmer going south. I believe it's just before Firmer going south.
Do you know
On
where-
St. Anne's,
I see.
yeah. Obviously, the one on St. Mary's is very close. The one on on Selkirk.
But the St. Mary's one, sorry, even with respect to
St. Mary's one, I
size-
can quickly check my my Google if you wouldn't mind.
My apologies for making this a little longer, but I do like to know where these places are.
This is one copy.
It is between Firmer and Lagimodiere, almost dead center.
Furmore and which?
And Bishop Grandin,
Okay.
yeah. Firmer and- Yeah.
Which end?
Basically in the middle of Firmer,
Oh.
and if you look at St. Anne's, yeah, some,
Okay, thank you.
almost dead center from this map.
Okay.
Um,
Those are the only ones where I'm wondering what
fair
the
enough.
location is.
So we have the one at Selkirk, Mr. Chairman, 1288 a square foot. Lease started in April 1st, 2012, 5-year lease. 126 Isabel, 2,496 square feet, $15.87 a square foot, June 1st, 2015, 10-year lease. It's the most current lease that I have here, Mr. Chairman. 1100 Main Street, 2,059 square feet, 1166 a square foot, starting July 1st for a 5-year term. And the one at 125 St. Anne's, which is closer to St. Mary's, at $11 a square foot, 1,717 square feet, sorry, at $11 a square foot, started June 1st, 2013, 5.25 year lease term. And all of my comparisons are very close to the size of the subject property.
And you have used exclusively the income approach to value the property?
Yes, I have.
And given how the building is being used, the purpose for which it's being used, is it dependent upon this location? Is it benefiting from this location? Is it the type of business that could be fairly footloose as opposed to dependent on a location?
I would say so. I don't think it's not that prominent of a location, Mr. Chairman. I think it could go anywhere up and down. Probably go on St. Anne's Road. It can go on any. I think it should be on an arterial road. When I was inspecting the property, people were stopping by and coming in to purchase ready-made foods, frozen foods, etc. And I don't think it's dependent on this location, Mr. Chairman, to survive.
So it does storefront.
It does storefront too, yeah. It's also a catering business and storefront, a little storefront operation. With a table there, you can actually eat inside if you like, just one table.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions. Mr. Newfeld?
Just to follow up, you had meant, and I wasn't asking about your comparables, but you had discussed 978 St. Mary's. Is the occupant in that case Abaca Jewelers?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay, so you weren't aware that they've actually owned that building for a couple of generations?
The occupant is that right now. We have a reported rent on this property, reported net rent.
It's
Do you,
family.
I mean, this is an unfair question to ask me,
No,
and I'll answer it to the best of my knowledge. It's reported to us as a bona fide net rent, and that's all I'm gonna say, and I'm under oath here, Mr. Chairman. If he has any other information with respect to whether that's true or not, I suspect he has rebuttal evidence.
So
I mean, I'm not gonna get into an
what
argument.
you're saying though is you're relying on it because it was submitted to you and you're treating it as a bona fide rent.
We have to rely on information that's sent in to us. We do analyze this information, and we do believe it to be true. Of course, we've searched companies out, etc. This one comes up as a bona fide rent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Procedurally, sorry, that's another question. Procedurally, why are you saying it's an unfair question?
Procedurally, Mr. Chairman, he has, unless he has rebuttal evidence, maybe I should take that back. It's not an unfair question. I think it's an unreasonable question at this point in time. That's mine.
Mr. Newfeld?
Wow, thanks for looking into my heart here.
Yes, Mr. Newfeld.
Okay, this property is a very strange property, and my involvement with it is long and personal in terms of I've worked on this property with the owner since before it was purchased. At the time I first met her, she was relocating her catering business from her ex-husband's place down the road and found this building, and it was an older building on it. And the concept was if you could keep the foundation, you could keep the legal non-conforming status. And if you take a look at the zoning we provided for you and the outline of the building plan, the outline of the plan is shown on page 4, and the zoning in the following pages, and it is C2 zoning. So C2 does require some setbacks, and a 25-foot setback for one, and they do make the 25-foot setback at the corner, but you'll notice in their parking, the C2 zoning for their usage requires 1 stall per 250, and they certainly have nowhere near that. They have 3 stalls in total. But they knew that their particular use was not retail. It was classified as retail, it's catering, and it was mostly prepare on site and deliver in the back door. And they also purchased the residential building. Eric, what's the side street? You should know this, you should know this. Moore, on Moore, right across the back lane, to park their vehicles on, and rented that out to a residential tenant. So it was more of a dispatch and a preparation area and dispatch. Now, during the construction process, things got bad. As I said, they decided to retain the existing foundation, and on page 3, that's a picture I took of the existing foundation during the work progress. And you can see that it's got a full basement up front and then a crawl space at the rear. And it had filled up with water. That's just construction. So what happened during this process is that they had to reshore the foundation. It wasn't stable enough, added to their costs. And then when construction started, the contractor and owner had a great number of disputes, and I was required to go on a monthly basis to do a progress report so that they could release funds, because they were really at odds with each other. And I normally don't do this sort of work, but the whole block is, well, my in-laws had the business just next door, and you know, we also knew Eamon's family, who, the one I mentioned at 478 St. Anne's Road, on the other side. It was a bit of a community, and I didn't mind doing it. At the time, actually, my son, my daughter, and my wife were all alternately working at the family business just down the street. So, but that's why my involvement was, I could spare the time. So they had all these fights with their contractors, and now look at the pictures on page 2 and 3, and take a look at the equipment that's in there. Now that equipment is not taxable, and that was part of the cost that was in the permit. So chasing a permit is not a good idea. It was a business expense. Then they declared it because it was installed. What happened after opening it up in 2011 is that the owner decided to move on and sell, and she sold the business and rented it to a third party. And the assessor has a nice picture that shows new owner on it. The original owners were CJL, who was Linda Rocher. And then on his assessor's page 8, he noted new owner Les Filles Cuisine. So that entirely arm's length. They have a lease, which the assessor has provided the information for us. And I'll refer to his page 10. And I was asking him the question about 978 St. Anne's, and he answered, well, we relied on the mailer. Okay, that's a fair answer. So why don't we rely on the mailer for the subject? The income, net income from this mailer is, the only thing they put on here that shouldn't have been in here is the mortgage. And if you back out the mortgage, the potential income, pardon me, is $28,027. That's potential income. Now that compares to what the assessor has at $39,050, not $32,000. So $28,027 is the actual income. What we've used was, we rounded that up to $15 on the area. We had 1,900 and, yes. We had 1,928 square feet, and I think the discrepancy came from the actual former plan area, which was, may have been altered a bit during the renovation, because I noticed that there's a side stairwell that may have gone out past the original foundation, so we were using the original foundation. And we're comfortable with the 1975 the assessor has. I just haven't done a calculation, but it's really irrelevant, because the income is $28,000. It doesn't matter what size, it doesn't matter if you include the basement, and call the basement rentable, it's still $28,000 in total. And the point with that is, if we add the basement into our space, and we still, the gross rental out of there is still $28,000. The expenses are higher, but the shortfall's higher on a greater space. So we have decided to leave it out, because if we're not treating it as rentable, we're following a consistent methodology. So after the deductions for vacancy management and other, which I believe are the same as the assessor, and just double check that, because we're not, no, they're the same. We have an NOI of $24,530, and that's what it's actually generating. As far as capitalization rates are concerned, we have a number of comparables provided to you of projects, and this would be classified as a miscellaneous retail project. It's not strip. And on our page 15B, there are a couple of similar projects, and you can see that the range, reported range are 7.8. There's Jubilee at 8.04. On page 16D, we have Lilac, which is a restaurant at 9.47. And at the bottom of that page, 105 Regent, which is a pawn shop at 10%. The other way we look at capitalization is look at an optimal building and look at the difference between this property and an optimal building. And an optimal building would be at 7.75% as a retail, and the difference on this building is the size. It's much too small to be an investment property. It's a small time investment. As a result, the drive for returns has got to be higher. It's a single tenant. You lose one tenant, it's a higher risk. You could be vacant for 6 months, 8 months. Whereas in multi-tenant buildings, if you lose a tenant, you might lose a quarter of your revenue, and therefore it's riskier. The building itself is a hybrid. It's a 1950s foundation with a 2011 upper level. Anytime you get situations like that, it is not a question of trying to find, is there a blended rate? This is the foundation we're talking about, not the roof. You can replace a roof, you can replace a window, you cannot replace a foundation. It is an extremely vital part of it, requiring, I mean, you could replace it theoretically. It's certainly not cost effective to lift the building up and replace the foundation. So as a result, you have to consider that, because this is the heart of the building, or not the heart, the spine of the building. Without the spine, there is no building, and therefore you have to look at an older building, and 8.5% is reasonable, and that's the number that works out to our value. And you'll note that, and I'm not comparing the assessment, in 2016, the assessment was $324,000. Since then, the revenue has declined slightly. The initial lease was a bit higher, and it has been adjusted downwards to retain the tenant, and that would be the difference between the 2 years, is that it has declining performance. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. McCubbin, questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, if I can get you to turn your attention to page 2 of your brief. Starting with the photograph at the bottom. When was that photograph taken, Mr. Neufeld?
During the construction phase.
And would it be the same for page 3?
Page 3 is the basement during construction phase, and the bottom is several months earlier, before the building was put back on.
So I'm a little bit confused with respect to the integrity of the foundation, because you seem to be you seem to have a question with respect to the integrity. So there were problems, you said, that were found out with respect to the foundation. Were those problems remediated, and was it fixed before the building was put on, the structure was put on the foundation, Mr. Neufeld?
It was stabilized, and those people who have some background in construction and foundation knowledge know that there's no such word as fixed. It's stabilized. Doesn't mean it can't come back 6 months later or 60 years later, but it's a risk level.
Can we say the same thing with a new foundation? Can we say the same thing, there's always a risk here in Winnipeg
No,
with foundations?
No, because
Oh, okay.
the bylaws changed and the construction code changed. 2007 was a major change in the construction code. And if you look at a building that was constructed today versus one that was even 10 years old, you'll see that there are different standards for support, for the weaving tile, for lot grading, which is a massive issue in properties, lot grading. Just the simplest thing of having the water run away from the building instead of to it. So no, this was built in the 50s, 50 standards. You're not gonna make it better.
But yet with those two difference in years or time frames you're talking about, those older buildings still have substantial value and they're still carrying value, aren't they? Irrespective of what you just said.
Absolutely. But it's-
Okay,
but it's
those
a-
are all,
but
that,
it's a- But it is a diminishing value compared to a newer building.
okay. You referenced, Mr. Neufeld, the permit value, and you're saying, you referenced page 2 of your brief and you pointed to the stove and some equipment in there, and you said that's a part of the permit value, which, there are two values with respect to page 9 of my brief, Mr. Chairman. There's a value of $300,000 construction value, and there's a total project value of $500,000. Mr. Neufeld, which value are you referring to?
Your page 9 permit is not reliable for use here today. As I mentioned earlier, the project was completed under, in a legal dispute. And the contractor kept changing the permit value, and basically his percentage of his fee came off the permit value. The owner took exception with that, and as a result, as it went through the system, I was brought in, engaged by the owner and the lending institution to monitor the payments and review the degree of completion.
Maybe if you don't mind, before you carry on any farther, would you both agree that the permit value doesn't have much bearing on the income approach which has been used for the valuation here?
Yes, I agree.
Could we maybe leave that whole topic then?
Sure,
Just concentrate on the
it
income?
does have a reflection on the overall value of the property to some extent, too, Mr. Chairman.
In what
There
way?
is it's the cost to construct, okay?
I
And when you
realize
have,
that, but
and when you
what
have a
bearing
new,
does that have on the income approach?
when you have a new property, Mr. Chairman, the cost of construction is very close generally to the income approach when you have a newer structure. And this
Okay.
structure is newer,
All
okay?
right.
And that's my reference here. If this was a building that was built in 1980, I wouldn't be talking about the construction value here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you've answered my question, and Mr. Neufeld, so you're saying that they're reporting incorrect construction. You're saying that builders are reporting incorrect declared construction value to the city of Winnipeg? Are you saying that, Mr. Neufeld?
What I can say, because I can't answer that particular question because you're exposing me to the potential for liability. What I can answer is that the owner and the contractor had a much different number that they were working on, and there was a disagreement. And the original estimate for construction was $220. And so when the permit gets done by the contractor, that amount, what does the owner, they've got no say in this matter.
So you said a lot of things there, and that's fine. But you have no proof. You say a number there, 220. Do you have that information in front of you?
I
Mr.
was
Newfield?
there. I am not reporting from a story that someone told me. I was there.
Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Newfield, on your first page of your brief, you indicate the age to be, I assume the original age to be 1924.
There it is. That's what I was looking for. Yes, the original foundation dated to 24.
Yet you just gave testimony several minutes ago that this foundation was 1950 era.
There's two sets.
But,
If you take a look at the picture on page 3,
yes,
one was 24 and the other was 50s. And you can see that one was a crawl space and the other was a full basement.
but would you not agree it's not all poured concrete?
I think this is all formed concrete.
Would you not agree that the picture looks like it was done all at the same time?
Oh, let me just think this through here. You asked me a question a long time ago now. The what's the name of the part wall?
That, would you not agree that's a retaining wall?
Yeah, the retaining wall was recent. And remember I had said that they had problems reusing the original foundation, so they re-poured the retaining wall around the outside of it to stabilize.
So would you not agree then it's not a 1924 original age?
No, it is, because they didn't take out the existing walls, they didn't take out the existing support. You know, if you look at the top page, where the post comes down, they didn't re-pour that. They re-poured a foundation wall around the outside, so no, it was still a blended. It was a repair job done in a 1924 foundation. And the building was originally built in two sections, 20s, 50s, and then repaired in 11. And you're looking at part of the repairs.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes, you referred to the mailer of the city, and you came up with a figure of 28,027 after deducting the mortgage.
Or adding it back in.
Oh, adding it back in, well, anyway. And then you show in your page 1, the NOI as 24,530. Now, if I look at the mailer, there's, there are indications of deductions for the professional fees, office. In other words, some of the stuff you have in your management and so on is in the mailer. So I'm asking, what are you asking us to use here? The 2827 or the 24,530 that you have on your application? I'd just like clarification on that if you could.
First of all, the 28,027, we applied instead 28,920.
Mhm.
That's the potential income.
No, I'm talking about the NOI.
The NOI is arrived at after taking off the vacancy,
Mhm.
which there's no vacancy here, there's no actual vacancy, so that vacancy, removal of it with the shortfall is $2,400. And then the management and other was roughly $1,900. And that is taken off as a standard deduction on all revenue producing properties. Typically, the management, not typically, the management deduction has always been applied to all properties and is considered an asset management, not property management. What they've reported on their page 10 is property management, not asset management. The other is been taken off as generally to recognize replacements for reserves and other deductions of that nature. There is no replacement for reserve, there are no capital cost reserves. there are simply annual operating costs, and that's why the 2% is there. So there's no, the 28,000, as I said, we rounded upwards to $15 a foot, 28,920, rather than $28,027, and took off standard deductions, which were not taken off twice.
Okay, my second question is on cap rates. I know you made reference to certain sales, but if I go to your page, I call it page 20, by the way.
Okay, Sarah, you're gonna fix that, eh?
So if I call it your page 20, but you go after 18 and add a few. If I can find it.
Yeah. You're
And
talking
you've
about
got the, yeah, let me finish,
chart?
please. Let me finish, please. So we're looking at the cap rates, City of Winnipeg, retail, community, low of 6 and a high of 675. The city is using, I believe it's 7. And you're using, you referenced sales. I'm not sure what pages you were referring to, but part of your evidence is on page 20, is that these are rates that Colliers has mentioned. How much weight do we place to this?
well,
It's in your evidence,
Right.
that's why I'm asking the question.
we originally began putting this in because the city 4 years ago began putting in our rates and saying that they represented appropriate rates for buildings like this. And they don't, because we don't even track properties like this. If you turn 1 page further, under benchmark definitions, and it discusses what you have to do to meet the categories of the ones we have. Now, you mentioned community, you have 150,000 to 250,000 square feet, makes it national and local. There is no way that this, you don't even track these rates. These are inferior, but it's a starting point. It shows what the major markets are. And from there, what I'm saying is you have to adjust for the negative factors compared to the major rates. The buyer will come along and might be willing to spend 7% on a power center. And do you think that same buyer is gonna walk in and wanna buy a little catering joint at the same cap rate? They don't. They're gonna demand a higher cap rate because of the type of use, single tenancy, and the age. And that's just a starting point.
Okay, and your reference to revenues declining, is that post-reference? Because we got a lease here that goes till 2018, and so
No,
because you mentioned that.
yeah, no, the new tenant moved in 13, and the rent was higher, and they had agreed to bring it downward slightly. And I think, let me just give you the exact number here, because in take that back, it's the same revenue.
Okay.
28,104 instead of 28,027.
Because you did make mention that the assessment of 216 was 324, and that sort of justified, I believe is what you said, that you're asking the 289 because the revenue was down. So that's why I'm trying to
Yeah.
to relate both to your statement.
Well,
I just want to know if I'm in error.
yeah, no, I mean, normally I've got some notes here that tell me, and no, I retract that. The income is identical, virtually identical.
Okay. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Just one question. Are you familiar, Mr. Newfield, with cap rates generally for relatively small properties, like the subject in that stretch between Fermor and Bishop's Landing along St. Mary's?
There haven't been a ton of investment sales in selected small pockets like you're describing. This property is generally an owner-occupied type, as most of the others are on the strip. It's not until you go a bit further south when you hit the intersection with Dakota where we begin to see more investment properties.
What about non-investment type sales?
Yeah, they would be sold on a rate per square foot. So I didn't research those.
That's fine, thank you.
I can tell you my in-laws paid $100,000 for their 1,500 square foot building next door.
Duly noted. Thank you very much. Any summation? None required. Thank you. We will move on to our next property.
I'm just gonna step outside to do this.
730 Archibald is the next one.
It's when he coughs on you.
Yes.
No, he can keep it outside.
Yeah.
You could actually, call in his evidence if you want.
Video conferencing.
Yeah, well,
Safer.
one day, hopefully.
Yeah.
Unless we take a break now.
Certainly.
Yeah, let's take
5-minute stretch?
Sure.
Okay.
give them a break at the same time too.
Okay, I've assigned 5 minutes for the next one.
We'll see if
Good
you're
luck.
correct, Mr. Chairman.
Good luck, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we have 730 Archibald Street. Mr. McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. File number 18-423, the applicant is Colliers International. The roll number is 0603150870. The address is 730 Archibald Street. The owner is Nemes Properties, Inc. With respect to the roll year, I believe that's incorrect. Just let me check my information here, Mr. Chairman. Carol, would this not be a 2019?
It is a
It's
2019.
2019.
Looking at the application.
Fair enough. Okay.
It's not the clearest, but I think
So if you can correct that roll here, Mr. Chairman, on the brief to 2019, please. So we have a reference date we're dealing with, Mr. Chairman, of April 1st, 2016. The assessed value is $1,269,000. The classification is 60, other. This property is Ken's Carpet. It's a relatively new building that we're dealing here with, constructed in 2011. Purpose of use is retail. Quite a bit of storage at the back and some retail up front. Wall height 18 feet. We have a land area of 18,919 square feet, plan area of 7,041 square feet, and a gross floor area of 7,650 square feet. That difference between the plan area and gross floor area, Mr. Chairman, is the mezzanine level, which is structural in nature and houses an office and the lunchroom with running water, etc. So it's a fully used mezzanine. And we will be assessing that mezzanine level also, or atoning for value with respect to that mezzanine level. It's zone C2. I do have a recommendation, Mr. Chairman, to make on this property, and I'll tell you the value right now that I'm recommending. It's $1,081,000 even. And I'll let you know how I got to that value. And again, because, Mr. Chairman, this is a relatively new property, I will reference the permit values, and I've said before, it's been my experience that the permit values are always underestimated. It costs more to construct than is actually on the permits. And that's been my 32 years of experience viewing properties here in the city. So permit values we have, and it's included in my brief, Mr. Chairman. And I'll add the permit values up for you. It's $742,000, $29,594, and $2,874. The land was purchased, Mr. Chairman, in 2009, just before the building was constructed. And without any land adjustment, I'll use that value, and looking at an overall acquisition of the property in terms of permit value now added to the land value, in 2011, $874,464 in 2011.
So right, the construction value itself was 700, and what's the total?
The total, and there's some signage involved here too, but I'll give you the total, just bear with me, please. Total permit values, $774,468.
Okay.
I've inspected this property, Mr. Chairman, and it shows well, as it should. It's a relatively new property. As I've said, I have a recommendation to make, and maybe I will hand that out if you don't mind, so we can follow through with that.
Has this recommendation been discussed?
Yes.
And?
It's a good start.
Very positive comment.
So before we go into my brief further, Mr. Chairman, recommendation I have, you can see I've broken it out, the mezzanine now. The previous way the property was done, we did an overall rent with the overall gross floor area, leasable area. I've broken out the mezzanine. I've reduced the rent to $13 a square foot on the main floor and used half of that value, which is $650. It's typically something we do, and agents agree with that to some extent. And it's a relatively small area, 609 square feet. So we now have an effective market income less vacancy of $89,762, which equates to $11.73 per square foot overall.
Sorry, what was the value?
$11.73 overall per square foot. Expenses after to take from the effective market income include shortfall at $650, management at 5%, and other at 2%. We arrive at a total expense of $92.67 square feet. I'll get into the income and expense statement that was provided to us, Mr. Chairman. There's a cell tower on the property, and it's $6,000 per year. The owner garners from that. That's usually done below the expense line and added to the NOI. So after expenses, we arrive, and adding the cell tower income, I arrive at a value of $86,495 for the net operating income. Utilizing a cap rate of 8%, it's a relatively new property. I arrive at a value of $1,081,000. Now, if we can go to the income and expense statement submitted, Mr. Chairman, bearing in mind this is an owner-occupied property. I've searched the companies out and the owners and the directors, and it is owner-occupied. But I imagine there is a book rent or contract rent here on the property for income tax purposes. You write down a building from brand new, you write down so much every year. So you have to produce something that's relatively reasonable in terms of value for Revenue Canada. And that total income that the owner is reporting to us is $108,000, Mr. Chairman. You referenced that with the effective market income that you referenced that with that would be net, he's reporting, so I would say 91 plus 9. So you referenced that to the $95,491 as a net rent in total that I'm proposing in my recommendation. You can see that we're below what he has reported. But I might add, you should be referencing that with 102,000 because the 108 is the 6,000 with respect to the cell tower. So you just reference that to the 102 that he referenced there. Um, I believe the cap rate is fairly, is very reasonable for a new building, Mr. Chairman. When you look at industrial cap rates, and it's sort of like a mixture, it's a metal frame building. It's used for retail purposes. But if you want to go industrial, you look at the industrial cap rates and they're substantial, they're lower than the retail cap rates. I can reference page 6 of my brief, show that, Mr. Chairman. Between the 20th and 80th percentile, reported to us, single tenant for industrial properties, we have a cap rate range of 6 to 7.5. I'm at 8 for a brand new building, essentially. I'm not sure whether I should hand out this information. I guess I'll decide whether it's in dispute or not, the floor areas and the mezzanine levels, because I have additional development design summary here that was submitted to the city of Winnipeg. If it comes to that, I'll hand that out. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Questions?
Yes, I understand you had a chance to inspect this property,
Yes, I did.
and upon your inspection, did you go through the entire building, the front and the back?
Yes, I did.
So the front is the showroom,
Yes.
and the rear is the warehouse?
Yes.
Did you notice that there was a forklift in there
Yes.
and a loading dock?
Yes.
Your comparables on page...
Well, it's actually not a loading dock, it's all grade level.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yep.
And your comparables, page 3,
Yep.
these are the same ones you used on the last property. None of these have a warehouse portion to them, do they?
No, they don't. No.
And they're all a fair bit smaller as well?
Yeah, this is basically, I'm showing what retail would be renting for. I mean, I could have split out the portion at the back versus the portion in front, but I chose not to do that.
And you didn't have anything for a warehouse, retail warehouse that you could show us?
Oh, we do have that information, and I can tell you it would more than support or be substantially higher, but I chose not to do that.
And the adjacent land usage is, what's located next door and to the rear?
The rear are tracks.
Okay.
Next door, go by memory. I can't say, I'd be guessing, I can look at my map, but I don't think we need to.
It's fair to say that this is kind of a mixed-use area.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
retail, there's industrial, there's...
Residential
tracks,
across the street,
residential.
yeah.
Did you note the type of construction?
Yes, it's metal frame,
Metal envelope.
metal envelope.
Did you examine the framing?
Not very closely, no,
Okay.
no.
Does the department have something that distinguishes between a metal framed or metal pre-engineered versus wood frame stick built?
With respect to what, construction costs or income valuation?
Yeah, to your standards for
For income?
rent or for capital. Do you make
No,
a
we don't,
distinction?
no, we don't make that distinction, Mr. Chairman. What we do is we have rents, net rents that come in and on the properties, dependent on the use, and that's what we use. We don't get into, we don't mix apples with oranges, Mr. Chairman.
So, but you're not focused on a difference in style. Okay, thank you, those are my questions.
Mr. McIntyre?
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman. Of the gross floor area, Mr. McCubbin,
Yes.
what area is the showroom?
That's a good question. Let's see if there's a picture in the front here. It's about half, I would say, of the property. If I can see an interior photograph here. Going back from memory, it's a good half or more of the property. The warehouse portion is set way back, and the front portion is where the public is allowed to walk around, and then the mezzanine is in the front. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Terrio?
Because I know we're gonna look at the leasable area, I see the mailer on page 12 refers to the leasable area as 7650. Place any weight on that, or that was your own conclusions on your potential market income and the breakdown you have on page, well, your new page I'll use?
Yeah, those are the figures I'm using, essentially. Because, and I suspect he's reporting the gross floor area, which is the mezzanine level also.
Well, he talks, it says total leasable area.
Yes, which would include the mezzanine.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second question, I know we looked at the previous case at 7% on the cap rate, and this one is 8, and they're both new buildings, but I know they're somewhat different. So you're saying that this is industrial, it's combined with retail, and the other was community retail. Can you maybe help me a little more on this 7 versus the 8? Because I went back to your chart,
Yeah.
and maybe you can say a little more about that?
In the background, I can tell you it's a size issue, Mr. Chairman. The smaller the property, we have difficulty. The properties you're referencing before is a small property, 2,000 square feet. Generally, those properties don't sell on the market based on their income. They're usually owner occupied, or they have a value. But if you try to relate that value back in an income summary and try to come to the sale price, the cap rate will be lower than, say, a traditional retail property. That's as far as I can go with that explanation right now. It would be a size difference.
Size difference. Okay,
Yep.
that's all, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman, thank you.
Just so I understand your answer, you're saying that the property that we previously dealt with would normally be done on a sales approach?
Generally, no, they should be done in a sales, direct comparison approach, Mr. Chairman, but they're not. We'll be moving in that direction in the next cycle or the one after that. But what I did try to say, Mr. Chairman, is that those properties are basically owner occupied. They're not purchased on their income generation, sort of.
So the subject in this case?
Yes.
Is it suited to its location?
I think it's well suited to its location, yes.
And for traffic, it's a reasonable location for retail trade? Are there any difficulties with the warehouse portion of it, truck access, things like that?
Not that I can see, Mr. Chairman. Not that I can see. This is, it functions very well. And I'm not sure, I'm not going to speak for the owner, but the owner had a chance, and he's been in the business for a while, he had a chance to scout areas out, and it's a relatively new building. It's not something he picked up. He actually invested money in this building, so he must have done his due diligence, so it
Okay.
operates fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I apologize, I also have some changes, and this is a property I was not familiar with until a day before the evidence was due when I inspected it, and since then there have been some other things that came up, so we do also have a change in value to move closer to the, together. We're still some distance apart. I'll go over that. So the building itself, as you heard, is warehouse style, warehouse retail style. Is wood frame construction, so 2x6 wood framing, wood truss, metal envelope, cheap wood construction. It's a carpet warehouse. Showroom in the front, storage in the back. And you can see the pictures. with the forklifts. And when it comes to the mezzanine, there's two ways of looking at this. I chose to look at it and call it a warehouse, and the assessor chose to look at it and call it retail. I think that as a professional, I would value this as a warehouse, and in doing so, I would use industrial measurement style, which is to ignore the mezzanine, because all the mezzanine does is takes away good storage space. It is all high Q. Now, the assessor's done it as retail. And the difference in value is marginal, because if you'll note that even though he's added revenue for a mezzanine, he's also used a 6% vacancy, and I've used a 4%. The difference in the NOIs, and I was just sitting here calculating it out, comes to $1,700 if you use the same rental rate. So it's not a big difference. And I'm not, I don't think that you have to worry about it as a contentious issue. I'm saying that I'm doing this the right way. This has got to be done in warehouse standards. And if we live with it as retail, I don't have a problem either. What we, our only difference really is the rental rate. And the assessor's using what they're using, and I had an $8 rate in there, and that's when we started off looking at our industrial. And on page 5, we have a number of industrial rates. Some are in the area. These are all across the city, and as you can see, they're really at the low end. And we tried to find something that was similar to it, a good quality warehouse, we'll call it. While we were preparing this, I was involved with an arbitration down the street at 550 Archibald for a reference date of April 2016 lease renewal. And it was resolved a day after this. And it's a very similar space. It's been retrofitted, so it was built as a warehouse, but then brought in extra air handling for a higher human load. And the rental rate they came at was $9.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna, if I can object, Mr. Chairman, you can tell me I can't, but now he's starting to put in evidence with respect to numbers, and I'm not saying he's not telling the truth, Mr. Chairman, but if he's had this information, I would have asked him to submit it prior so I can look at it. Now, he can say anything he wants with respect to numbers, and you can stop him. I'm objecting right now, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Newfield, are you bringing in evidence at the hearing that you did not previously submit?
I am changing my value upwards based on an arbitration that I had that resolved after the evidence due date, and I thought was better evidence of the potential market rent. And if the assessor doesn't want me to revise my number upwards, I'll leave it at $8. But and I was just looking for the exact date when I was notified that we were done, and I've got an August 23rd date that I received notification of the final value. And it was the reference period, and it was a perfect property. I would have included it had we been resolved. It closed at $9. That's why I'm adjusting my value upwards to $9 based on this. Came in after the evidence deadline. So if like I said, I can use $8 or $9. I've reworked the numbers at $9, and I'll give you those numbers.
Okay, before you do that, I'd like to take a short recess and have a discussion with the panel members.
Okay, well, you can ignore, why don't you just ignore the source of it and simply say I'm increasing my value to $9 and leave it at that. You don't want me to increase it, I won't.
I'd like to have a short recess.
Okay.
Are we leaving?
We're leaving.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld, you've suggested that you would provide a different value based on some evidence that you would give verbally, but is not part of the written material that you submitted and that Mr. McCubbin has had a chance to go through. Our preference would be that you stick with your written material. We don't have that information either that you've been referring to, and we will then listen to your arguments relative to this written material.
All right. Nothing prevents me from changing my opinion of value, though. And I just can't refer to any other evidence, and that's fine. The other thing, as I did mention, this was a new property for me, and I saw the cell tower, which is on the neighboring site. And I did ask the question on revenue, and I was told none. And now I see that the assessor has brought forward that there is revenue. I imagine this, it's not from the siting itself, it could be from an easement. I don't know anything about it, but I'm willing to accept the $6,000 in revenue, which I did not have in my possession. Also, upon examination of our valuation and the other properties and the assessor's capitalization rate, I find that it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable in relation to our consistency of application of different property types. The one we heard earlier today versus this property is an example. This is a better property on investment grade, so we're willing to accept the 8%. So I have also, for reasons I will not explain, changed my rental rate upwards to $9. The resulting, should I just give you my resulting NOI?
Certainly.
Okay, the resulting NOI changes to $61,562. And that's a change in the rental rate, application of industrial parameters, and addition of $6,000 in income. 61562. I did recalculate if we accepted the assessor's workup as retail, and that number, it doesn't, as I mentioned, doesn't change much. It's actually 63,205, and that's 7,650 square feet, same rental rate, and retail parameters. Capped at 8%. The first number provides us a value of $769,523, rounded to $770,000. The latter number is $790,058, rounded to $790,000. So those are the two approaches you would look at, one as warehouse, one as retail. A slightly higher value if you treat it as retail. So the only thing then that we do disagree on is the rental rate.
Okay. Mr. McCubbin, question?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. If I could turn your attention to page 5, Mr. Neufeld, of the presentation. I notice you haven't inserted the ages of these comparisons. Do you know the ages of these comparisons?
I know most of them within a few years or so. If you had one in particular.
You. Okay, sorry. You have one in particular, you said?
No, I said if you had a question in particular about one, I know most of these.
Which is your best comparison here?
As I mentioned, these are I was looking at this range, and these are deals that came from Colliers that we've done, so they're in our records, so we know they're clean of influences, they're industrial. And I used a number at the upper end, actually outside this range, to account for the Superior level. If you look at some of the better ones, 1695 Sergeant, 1/3 of the way down.
Sorry, 1695 Sergeant.
Yeah,
Would that be your better comparison?
it's a good comparison. That one is HD Supply, which is Home Depot's Jobbers outlet. So it is a retail warehouse.
How old is that building?
The building has 3 ages on it, and dating from the 50s to the 80s.
50s to the 80s.
Yeah, this particular section is the high ceilinged newer section.
And, sorry, and the area of this property at $6.95 per square foot, Mr. Neufeld?
It's 23,000.
23,000 square feet, okay. Is that your best comparison?
Well, I think
Because we don't need to go through, I'm trying to focus you on the.
Yeah, it's one of the better ones. It's a better location.
Okay.
And it's,
So,
it is open to the public, and it is a retail warehouse. And
So-
it's similar high ceilinged.
so essentially, this is at $7 a square foot for a much substantially older building,
No,
and a much larger square foot area.
no,
Is that correct?
it's not substantially older. I said the building was built in sections. The old section is occupied next door by a variety of other users. This was a metal pre-engineered add-on. It looks, when I was in there, I would guess 1983, 84 construction. That's not, it's actually superior construction to the subject because it's metal. Our subject is wood.
You've heard of the economy of scale, right?
It is, the.
You've
Sure.
heard of the economy
Yeah.
of scale with respect to values?
Sure.
You have. Do you apply it in appraisal?
Well, which rule are you talking about?
The economy of scale.
No,
It
no.
applies to a number of, it applies to land, buildings.
There are several economy of scale.
Okay, well, you tell me what your idea of economy of scale is.
Well, there's a concept that price varies by size of the real estate commodity, right? And for every situation, there's a different application of the rule. For example, if you want to build a big building in a brownfield area, you pay more because you have to amass more land and put it together. If you want to lease a big space of property in an occupied office building, you pay more because you've got to displace tenants. In a greenfield situation, if you have an empty building and someone wants 3 floors, he pays a lower rate. If you have a field that's going to be developed and someone wants a big purchase, he'll pay less because he's taken a bigger chunk and it costs you less to service him. So as you can see, each development situation varies.
Okay, let me focus you here. We're talking apples to apples, okay?
Well, tell me.
We're talking apples to apples. Similar locations, similar use, not brownfield or anything. What sort of economy of scale do you apply?
On this, there's not enough difference in space between them to look at much. There's nothing you're gonna be able to measure and come up with an objective analysis.
Mr. Chairman,
You have a question?
I haven't got any more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McIntyre?
Actually, Mr. McCubbin took some of my questions, but I have a couple others. With respect to the cell tower, Mr. Neufeld, you had indicated that it was on another parcel of land.
That's correct.
If I look at your page 3, is that not the cell tower at the rear of the building?
That's correct, and it's not on their property. I went out and, so this is an angle shot, so I went out to look at the property, and a better picture of it will be on page 4. And on page 4, the red marking is the subject property, and if you look immediately north of it, there's a white square, and then the tower itself is a fainter white stick, linear figure, and it comes from the neighbor's property. There is some equipment on the subject property behind a fence, and that's air conditioner and heating units are there.
Are those for the subject property's building, or?
Yes, I believe so, but after looking at it, we, again, pulled the lot lines. This is definitely outside their lot line. And I checked with the on-site people, and they said, no, it's the owners next door. And then Mr. McCubbin brings evidence of a payment. So I didn't have time to get back to the ownership and why he's getting payment for it. But we will accept, because he's declared it, and he is getting revenue, and I have added that to my income. So I'm not gonna dispute the money.
Okay.
It is, but
He did report it.
Yes, I didn't have this report, I would have added it in had I known it, but we're not disputing the money, but it is not on his property, so I'm guessing it's for an easement of some sort. Or perhaps he's drawing service from the subject building, because it's, and part of the service that comes there, provision of power is coming from the subject, that could be as well.
Okay, I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Terrier?
Yeah, just one of clarification on your, I don't want to get into your revised figures.
Right.
I just want to know, in your revised figures, did you add in the square footage of the mezzanine? I'm not sure I understood.
Yes, I did. I
Oh, you
gave you
Okay.
two sets of numbers,
Okay.
one
Okay,
without it,
and one with it.
one with it.
Okay.
One comes to 770, the other comes to
Goes
790. And without it, we treat it like industrial, 4% vacancy, 360
Yeah.
shortfall. With it, 6% vacancy, 650 shortfall.
Okay, that's all I needed, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I have no questions. Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Ryman.
Please state your name. To confirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Given your normal efficiency, Mr. Reimer, 4 minutes.
Was that like the last 5
I
minutes?
like the last 5 minutes.
So we expect to be here after lunch?
Yeah.
159 St. Anne's Road is the next property up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. File number 18-445, the applicant is Altus Group Limited. The roll number is 0800134870. The address is 159 St. Anne's Road. The owner is 6560301 Manitoba Ltd. The reference year is April 1st, 2016, the roll year being 2019. The current assessed value is $418,000. Classification is 60. Mr. Chairman, I have a recommendation to reduce the total assessed value to $329,000, which I believe is accepted, and that's based on the rent for business tax purposes.
Sorry, you're saying that reduction comes about as a reduction of rent?
Yes.
And Mr. Reimer, is that acceptable?
We are in agreement, yes.
All right. I think we can move along to the next one.
It's under 4 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
We're doing well now. It might average out, you never know.
107.
Next one up, 107 Burning Glass Road.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. File number 18-622, the applicant is Altus Group Limited. The roll number is 060934622235. Address is 107 Burning Glass Road. The owner is Sage Creek Development Corporation. The rule year is 2019, reference date being April 1st, 2016. The current assessed value is $2,930,000. It is zone C2. The land area, which is, I would say, 99% or more of the value, is 142,165 square feet. The plan area being for the building on site is 1394. I will accept Mr. Reimer's value with respect to the building, Mr. Chairman, and that value is, I believe, 70,000. $75,000, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation here, before I move forward into my brief, is
We're looking at page 4 now?
I'm just trying to come up with my recommendation, then we'll go to page 4. Page 4, with respect to page 4, that is the current value of the structure, the value of the structure and site. I'm changing that value, yeah, to 75,000. So sorry. So my new value, Mr. Chairman, is $2,710,000. $710,000.
Yeah.
And that's essentially reducing the value on page 4, as Mr. Tarian referenced, from $295,000 to $75,000. That income summary was done incorrectly.
Before we go any farther, is that the total recommendation?
As to the issue of the building value, then we're in agreement, there's still an examination of the land value.
Right.
We'll need to-
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could turn your attention to page 9, the last page of my brief. It shows the relative location of this parcel of land. The red dot is actually where the building is located, but the outline of the property is goes from a little bit to the left of the red dot all the way to that purple line in the center of that block and down south, so to speak. So it's essentially vacant land. To the east, to the west, we have the newer development in Sage Creek with respect to the Sobeys, Strip Mall, etc. And that's all that development there. The picture below shows the actual structure. It's been advertised for sale for some time now, and it's you can move it off the site if you like. It has no basement on it. Now, with respect to the land value, I have comparisons on page 8, Mr. Chairman. Majority of the properties are on Kenniston Boulevard, around the Seasons development. The last comparison that I have on this page is 50 Sage Creek Boulevard. It's a bona fide transaction. We've searched the sale out. It was Sage Creek Development Corporation to Sage Creek Village Center. it sold back in July of 2011 for $5,960,000. It's zone C2, same as the subject property. It's substantially larger than the subject property, Mr. Chairman, at 530,555 square feet, and sold for $11.23 a square foot. The value for the subject property in terms of square foot is, the square foot value of the land is $18.53 per square foot. So based on the economy of scale, and I know one sale does not make a market, but the other sales are higher, and a value of $18.53 we think is appropriate for this parcel of land, considerably smaller than my last comparison. You can see the other comparisons range in value from from a low of $13.77 a square foot to a high of $28.62 a square foot. These are different type of zoning. It's C4, highway commercial essentially. But again, I'm focusing on the last sale, and based on the economy of sale, I think it's assessed fairly. I note, and you can stop me, Mr. Chairman, if you choose to. There's a parcel of land just above this, to the north of this, 103 Sage Creek Boulevard, that's zone C2. That was confirmed by this board and is now before the municipal board, and the value was at a higher rate per square foot than the subject property. And I'll leave that with you, and I'll ask you to confirm the current assessed value, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCubbin's reference, I'd ask the board to place very, very limited, if any, weight on the reference to the other parcel dealing with another assessment. It's not in evidence, and ask the board to place the appropriate weight accordingly. Mr. McCubbin, so we can focus on the land value. That's the only thing under debate this morning now. And I appreciate Mr. McCubbin, your review of the building value. Then turning to so one point of clarification first of all. So if we could turn to your page 5, and this is the initial valuation. We are agreeing on the lower building value, but can you advise, what wasn't clear to me was what in effect, the total adjustment for the land of $2,635,000, what land area is that based upon? Because the department would have attributed a land area to this, what they're calling the store. So I'm wondering if we can clarify what land area the department applied for the excess land. And because I think you mentioned the rate was $18.53 a foot, but was that based upon the entire land area or the net land area that was used for the adjustment?
The entire area.
Okay, there would be some land attributed, and it's not a big deal, Mr. McGunn, but there would be some land that would be attributable to, again, what the department's classified as the store?
Sure. I guess my rationale for including that land on the 30, because it's it's marketed as a movable building. Okay. So the value is really in the land, and there's land value in that building of $75,000. Doesn't include land and building, it's just a building value.
Okay. So effectively it's like almost like a cost approach, kind of, sort of.
Essentially,
yeah. Okay.
Essentially.
Okay. And I would agree, Mr. Chairman, with Mr. McCubbin's comments that the land value is key here. So, Mr. McCubbin, then if we could turn to page 8, please. Now, you've been very forthright in your comments. I gather that from your perspective, in your opinion, the 50 Sage Creek Boulevard sale, the last one I heard you say the economies of scale, but as far as obviously location and comparability and zoning and such, leaving aside the larger land area, this is the comparably believe best represents the value, correct?
Yes,
And the C4 zoning, that for the other ones, again, the ones on Keniston and Sterling Line, that's all more intensive commercial development is allowed.
correct.
And as you, again, been very forthright, this is all in the Seasons Outlet Mall and that area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I think we can agree the 50 Sage Creek of the comparables would be the one that would be closest as far as comparability. Now, so we've got 50 Sage Creek, call it 530,500 square feet of land. This is the parcel to the immediate west of the subject, correct?
That is correct.
So if we go to your page 9, and just for the board's reference, the little red dot, this is the parcel we're talking about, obviously that's the little building, but the parcel is right there. And then the 50 Sage Creek is that entire development that's shown on the aerial photograph to the west?
Correct.
Of that, okay. And it has in fact been fully developed with a large number of retail, the grocery store, the drug mart, the restaurants, and the Tim Hortons, all that stuff, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now, were you aware of or did you have consideration when you're talking about the economies of scale, that the parcel, looking at your map on page 9 at the top, the parcel that would be to the north and west of the subject, and it's only a small portion of it showing, but that is also a key part of the commercial development for this subdivision, correct?
Correct.
And there's a new McDonald's that's just gone on fronting on the corner of Sage Creek and Lajemodier.
Right.
Okay. So now, and here's where this is leading, Mr. McCubbin. Obviously, factually, I'm in absolute agreement that the size of 50 Sage Creek Boulevard is sort of 4 times the size of the subject, no dispute. But here's the question. The department, when they're placing the land value on the subject as commercially zoned land, as a prospect for commercial development, did the department in its valuation take into account the fact that the property to the immediate west is already got a huge retail development that is fully completed, and that the property, the next phase of the development, is going to be the very large parcel to the north and west of the subject, thereby making the subject property at best a mid-term and much more likely a very long-term development prospect? Was that thought process, or did the department consider that when valuing the subject?
I can't answer that question, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't involved in the initial land sales study and placing the assessed value on this property, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, fair enough. I understand you're not in the land valuation section, but can we agree with this then, Mr. McCubbin, that part of, obviously the location is key, but part of the land value, inherent land value typically for an investor, certainly the value is driven in very large part by the prospects of development, whether it's short-term, mid-term, or long-term. Do you agree on that?
Well, absolutely. A development horizon plays a part in what someone would pay for a parcel of land. Yeah, it depends on the development horizon. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Mr. McIntyre.
I just have one question, Mr. McCubbin. You had mentioned that this house was for sale. Is it a requirement of that sale to move it off the site?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yes, it can't be located there. Yes.
And do you know what the sale listing is?
I believe the sale listing is $95,000 earlier. And that was this year. I know this is post-reference, but the sale came up after the reference date, the need to move this property off the land. And still no takers as far as I know.
Well, it's been there since the development began.
Yeah, it was used as a sales office initially. And, yeah.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tirian?
Yeah, well, it's sort of piggyback on Mr. Reimer's question on page 9.
Yep.
So, maybe how do I do this? So are you saying, Mr. Reimer, that this is, and I just trying to, this is the area that is gonna be developed before this one? Is that what you were saying?
Mr. McCubbin, can you?
Sure.
So,
Because, you know, this is what we're looking at.
this is what we're looking at?
Yeah.
This is, that's already all been.
Yeah, understand.
It's all of this, and then you're gonna see it in my
Oh.
brief, it's all of this stuff here. that-
Okay,
Part of
not-
it's developed here.
not this
Nope,
one.
nope, not this, it's all this stuff up here, and you'll see it in my brief shortly.
Okay.
And it's only half this one? It's
Well-
not this whole thing?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly right, the dividing the.
Oh, it's only half.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, like
exactly.
the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
So, the value of the subject depends on its marketability for development, obviously. And Mr. Reimer has pointed out that there's a lot of development at 50 Sage Creek. What are those developments at 50 Sage Creek? Do you know well enough to go using this picture to tell us what these buildings are?
I've driven out there. I can tell you what's hidden here is the Sobeys, and just to the south of the picture, you can't see it. Further down, there are strip malls surrounding, and there's a car wash more towards the eastern end of this with a gas station. I'm going from memory here. It's generally retail. Obviously, it's retail. Dentists, a bank. Yeah, there's a bank there too, so it's a mixed retail use. Yeah. All zone, it's confirming to the zone.
Are you familiar with any marketing that is being done of the subject property? And are there any particular uses that marketing has highlighted that are not in Sage Creek and would make this an attractive thing to develop?
No, I'm not familiar with that, I didn't study that.
How long has the development at 50 Sage Creek been there?
Since 2011, I believe, around 2011.
All of these structures have been in place?
No, they were built at different times. Up until the last couple of years, I believe, they were still building those strip malls surrounding. Yeah, it took place in stages.
All right,
Yeah.
those are my only questions. Mr. Rimmer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to preface that in that development, just to the immediate west, it's 50 Sage Creek. You've got a Tim Hortons, you've got several other restaurants, some of the smaller ones that take out pizza, but also, I think it's called the Rockwood Bar and Grill. Been there a few times, very good place incidentally. But you've got 2 chartered banks, you've got the grocery store, you've got the Shoppers Drug Mart, you've got the Liquor Mart. You've got virtually every amenity, save and except for a McDonald's, to compete with sort of the fast food with the Tim Hortons. And now you've got the McDonald's on the parcel I alluded to, and I'll get into this shortly, at the corner of Sage Creek and Elijah Modier. Obviously, they wanted the exposure to Elijah Modier, and they got it. So my entire case is predicated on the assumption, confirmed explicitly by the owner, that this parcel at very best only has potential in the midterm, and almost certainly we're looking at longer term, because the development, very massive development to the immediate, massive by residential Sage Creek standards, they have already got virtually every amenity you want in place there. And the next phase is going to be the very large parcel to the north and west of the subject. That was the reason underpinning my question of Mr. McCubbin. Again, he's been very forthright and he wasn't involved in the land valuation, I get that. But certainly I'm suggesting that has a significant impact on the valuation of the subject. Now, I'm going to hand out just a wee bit of rebuttal. Mr. McCubbin has been, again, with his comments, we're both in agreement that the Sage Creek parcel would represent the best comparable, so I'm not going to dwell on that at all. The comparables, or the rebuttal merely identifies the location of the comparables on Kenniston around the outlet mall for the board's reference. Should the board in its deliberations have any questions to where those are located, It's all in the materials, but given the nature of Mr. McCutcheon's evidence, I'm not going to speak more to it. Because again, he's been very, very straightforward in what he's suggesting for the land value. So, if I could ask the board members, Mr. McCutcheon, to turn to our brief, and on page 2, our request this morning is to reduce the assessment from $2.93 million to $1,944,000. If you look at the map on the bottom of page 2, so there is the parcel we're talking about, it's shaded in red. The very large 50 Sage Creek is to the immediate west. That very large parcel at the corner is Sage Creek and Lash, at the southern corner of Sage Creek and Lash. The very large parcel that is now partially developed and will be continued to be developed is to the north and west. You still can't see all of it, but it's the parcel at the corner, at the northern part of the corner of Sage Creek and Lash Modier. And the McDonald's I just alluded to is actually right at the corner of Sage Creek and Lash. And there's significant capacity for retail development and commercial development in this parcel that's only just beginning now. So that has a serious impact on the development potential for the subject, and we suggest therefore on the valuation. If we turn to page 3, this is again factually no dispute. It's C2 zoned land located at the corner of Burning Glass Road, I should say, and Sage Creek Boulevard, 143,748 square feet or 3.3 acres. Again, we're in agreement as to the value for the former sales office, so with that $75,000 value, I'll move from that issue. Now, if I could ask the board and Mr. McCutcheon to turn to page 4, this is probably one of the better area photos. So, at the top, the subject again is with the red dot, the very, very large commercial development that's already been developed to the immediate west. That includes all the things that I mentioned, the Sobeys and the Liquor Mart and the Shoppers and the two banks, et cetera, the Tim Hortons. And then to the north, immediate north of that, at the corner of Sage and Creek and Lash, that gives the board sort of a visual of the very, very significant commercial retail capacity that exists at the corner of Sage and Lash and Modier. And if you think about it, for most retail purposes, they're going to want the exposure to Lash, and that is the property that will give it to them, or at least the tenants along the west side of that very large parcel, which is why McDonald's chose to develop, if one looks at that parcel, at the southwest corner of the parcel, right at the corner of Sage Creek and Lash and Modier. So they've taken one, or only a small portion, but one of those portions that has frontage on Lash, and that is the parcel that will be developed for commercial and retail services as demand arises. You've got basically hits on every significant retail type of tenancy, right from grocery stores to the fast food restaurants to the other restaurants now, and the Liquor Mart and such. So you've got all the amenities in place, and demand by definition for these commercial and retail potentials is going to go down. And that explains why that very large parcel has still got only very limited retail development on it. But that is the way of the demand for the retail commercial uses. That's going to present a much higher demand because it's got the frontage on Lash and the access via Sage Creek, which is the major road going through there. So when you look at our subject now, this has absolutely no exposure to Lash and Modier whatsoever. It's located further east of the very large primary development for commercial and retail, and that, in my respectful submission, would have a very large impact on value. If one then moves to page 6 of our materials. So the comparables we've listed, they're a mix. The first two were not coded as vacant commercial lands. 336 Ward was multifamily vacant residential land, sold in 2011 for $960 a foot. 1450 Waverly was coded as vacant industrial land, now has been developed with an intensive office building at $1062 a foot. And then moving down from there, the Pembina Highway, I'm not going to dwell a lot on that. I think that's got its own set of circumstances. But 50 Sage Street, but I'm agreeing with Mr. McCutcheon that is a very good comparable. And I'm also, for the reasons I've suggested, suggesting to this board this morning that value, notwithstanding the larger size, that had obvious and clear, virtually immediate potential and was developed immediately after that with some very intensive retail commercial development. And therefore, the economies of scale would simply not apply because the development horizon for the subject is a lot longer, longer term. The Kenniston, the next property on Kenniston, that is actually the same, also the same comp the assessors got in there. We put that in there as well. But not dwelling on that. Northtown, 350 Northtown, this is a commercial development in the Waverly West subdivision, both 350 Northtown and in the very last sale index number 9, it was 350 was bundled together with 400 Northtown and sold at 1722, and prior, a couple of years prior to that in 2014, just the 350 Northtown comparable had sold for 1379. 23 Rothwell is actually the new Mercedes-Benz dealership that fronts on Kenniston, but it got access from Rothwell, so that's why it's got a Rothwell address. Sold at $13.80 a foot in 2014, and then $590 Sterling Lion, sold at $14.92 a square foot. I've got maps and some brief descriptions. Perhaps what I'll suggest is I'll go through them briefly and sort of key on the ones that I believe are most appropriate. 336 Ward at the bottom of page 6, that's been developed, that was purchased for $960 a square foot in December of 2011, has been developed as a multifamily, an apartment building. Turn to page 7, 1450 Waverly, this is the industrial zone land, but has been developed with an office building and sold for $10.62 a square foot. Pembina Highway at Cluche, this is the parcel that sold in April 13 for $11.14 a square foot. Smaller land area, zone C2, but I'm not going to suggest that the location of that, the location of this subject would, if anything, be, while this has got exposure to Pembina, it's also, if you're familiar with the corner, it's just to the north of the corner of Pembina and the perimeter, and it's a bit of an odd location. I think the most likely use of that would be multifamily, but nothing's happened to date. Moving to page 8, 50 Sage Creek, that's what Mr. McCubbin and I have both been talking about, the sale for $11.23 a square foot in 2011. Again, I stress that's the high demand, and what was immediately developed is intensive commercial retail with the frontage on Lash, and the higher demand is reflected in that price. The next sale, this is Kenniston, north of Spurfield, and this has been developed with a Lowe's store. This was again a larger parcel bought in May of 13 for $13.76. Again, though, it's purchased with a purpose for immediate development, and of course the Lowe's was constructed reasonably shortly after that. I think probably about 3.5 to 4 years after that, in a very, very good retail location. Going to page 9, sale number 6. This is the Waverly West sort of when you look at the map there. This is the central area where their commercial and retail development has been proceeding, and this is a sale of the more easterly parcel on Northtown Road that sold in $13.79 per square foot in November of 14. Land area is 192,722, so a little bit larger than the subject zone C2, but I'm going to suggest to this board that that does represent a very good comparable for a property that would again have prospects for virtually immediate development, and that is also what has happened. Sale number 7, 23 Rothwell, this is the Mercedes-Benz dealership. Again, it's got frontage on Kenniston. Obviously the exposure is what they wanted, but the access to Kenniston, clearly you can't get a curb cut off of Kenniston, so the access is through Rothwell Road. That sold in September 14 for $13.80 a square foot. Sterling Line, sale number 8, Sterling Line. This has been developed with an apartment complex, sold in May 14 at $14.92 a square foot. Sale number 9, so this is the sale of the two parcels together, 350 and 400 Northtown Road. Those two properties sold in June 15 at a price of $17.22 a square foot. Again, these properties had immediate prospects for development and have been developed, and therefore the sale price will reflect the premium paid for that very near-term development, and that, in my opinion, would make these far superior to the subject. So, for all of the reasons I've talked about, and I'm now on page 11, the largest site to the west, and I did list some tenancies there in the first paragraph. That site has the Sobeys, has the Shoppers Drug Mart, has a Shell station, Tim Hortons, a Liquor Mart, 2 banks, and several restaurants, among others. There's other sort of chiropractic, quasi-medical in there. So that represents virtually all of the larger value targets, with saving except for the competitor McDonald's, which moved into the site at the north, also had exposure to lash. So given the peculiar state, peculiar I shouldn't say isn't the right word, given the specific state of the development for the subject property, midterm at very best, and almost certainly longer term, because you've got to develop that very large parcel to the north and west with the higher value exposure to Lagimodier. So given the circumstances that the subject finds itself in, we're suggesting no more than $13 a square foot based on the assumption that at best it would be midterm horizon for development, and almost certainly more in the longer term horizon. So the value is indicated on page 11. We take the $13 a square foot times that land area, and we come in at a value, rounded value of $1,869,000. And then for on page 12, the adding in the $75,000 value for the original house, then the total request this morning is $1,944,000. We have attached for the board's reference, I won't go through it because to a large extent it sort of gets to the same information I presented in the materials, but we have attached the sales sheets, we've attached the assessments and the assessment maps, again reflecting the same locations that are shown in the text of the agreement. So subject to any questions of that Mr. McCubbin or the board members would have, that's our presentation this morning.
Mr. McCubbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I have no questions for Mr. Ryan.
Mr. McIntyre.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned that the Mercedes-Benz could not get a curb cut for their new dealership on Keniston.
Correct.
And you mentioned also that the parcel to the northwest of the subject is most likely to be developed.
Yes, absolutely.
So it is conceivable, and you can tell me in your opinion, whether another curb cut would be allowed on Lash when they've got two already going into Sage Creek within a short distance.
Absolutely not. No, it's the exposure to lash. The same thing with the Rothwell. It's not the curb cut that's important there. It's the exposure in the front and the exposure to Lagimodier and that traffic flow. But no, I would absolutely not expect that the city planners would permit a curb cut directly off Lash. You'd have to access Sage Creek and then access the parcel through Sage Creek Boulevard, similar to what the Rothwell Road, similar in principle to the Rothwell Road.
But currently you have a separate access into the development to the directly west of the subject where the Sobeys and all the retail is. You can get on and off Lash right there.
No, you gotta go on Sage Creek. You can get it directly off Lash. Oh, well then maybe they would, if they allowed it. I thought you had to go on Sage Creek.
I'm not sure if that was in the original development agreement, then I can't comment on that, but,
But the McDonald's, you have to go around to get
Yeah.
to McDonald's.
Yeah.
So,
right.
so,
So I'm not, I'll just leave it at that. That's no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Terrio.
yeah, on page 6, a question on your comparables.
Yes.
Under number 6, which is 350 North Down, you
Yep.
said that was Waverly West, I believe, and
Yep.
now it was fairly imminent to be developed, well, closer anyway, compared to the subject at 1379. But then it's been resold
Yep.
under number 9,
Yep.
and I see that's bumped up to 1722.
Yep.
So obviously, there's a combination of 350 and 400, but that's a closer date to the reference date of June 2015.
Yes.
And there's quite a bump in the value there, so that was kind of, I mean, it struck me that maybe the 1379 was low.
No, I would suggest two things. I wouldn't concede the 1379 was low. That was a bona fide transaction. But what happened, of course, that was bought in November 14, so somebody, the prospects for development of relating to sale number 9, the 350 and 400 together, that was then effectively a land assembly, or loosely called a land assembly because there's a road going through it, but that was purchased as then a bundle with the intent to develop both sides of it, and of course on 350, that's where the Tim Hortons is, and there's been already retail development starting very, very soon after that last sale. So I'm gonna suggest, I'm not conceding 1379 is low, but what I would say is the purchase of 350 and 400, that then was bought with a development horizon of virtually zero. At least on the one parcel, they knew they were gonna be developing. I suspect I don't know, I suspect when you've got a Tim Hortons involved, which there was, and some of those other retails, but specifically with Tim's, I suspect they had either a firm deal, or they certainly had a very good idea that Tim's would be moving in there as soon as they had their land. They'd acquired it and would be able to start building on it. So that's, the 1722 is a purchase in a very sort of a comparable area to Sage Creek, Waverly West, in the brand new area, but with a time horizon that is right there, as opposed to mid or long term.
Okay, that's all the question I have. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Well, just a question prompted by your last sentence. You're referring to that area is that Bridgewater?
That's Bridgewater, yes,
Okay.
exactly right, yeah.
You're referring to that as being comparable to Sage Creek. Can you give us an indication of how fast Sage Creek and the area across Lage is developing relative to the region around Bridgewater?
They're both moving at specific numbers, no, but certainly they're both based on my personal experience in driving through both neighborhoods repeatedly over the past 8 to 10 months. They certainly are both developing at a very brisk pace. Very, very brisk pace. I mean, Sage Creek is a little more mature. It was the areas that are being developed in Sage Creek are, so there's the green belt that is theoretically the extension of Lage, and then there's Hydro Corridor there, so that's being developed basically all the way up to Plessy, and now they're putting the houses along that back onto Plessy Road and heading a bit further south to closer to the perimeter. And then you've got across the way, you've got that development. It's another development, again, that's not part of Sage Creek, but it's to the immediate west of the subject that's also moving at a brisk pace. And then you've got with Bridgewater Forest, Bridgewater Lakes, and Bridgewater something else. I don't remember the third one.
Center.
Is that what it is? Okay, thank you. So there are houses going up, especially further, sort of at the south end, more southern parts, there's a lot of houses going up there as well. So brisk development in both areas.
Thank you. All right, that takes care of that one. Can we take a 5-minute stretch again?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next up is 115 Maryland.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. File number 18-670. The applicant is Altus Group Limited. The roll number is 12090379100. The address is 115 Maryland Street. The owner is W8 Zaid Inc. The roll year is 2019. The reference date, April the 1st, 2016. The current assessed value is $550,000. I have a recommendation to make on this property, Mr. Chairman, reducing the value from $550,000 to $532,000. And that's based on an overall square foot value of $9. Sorry, an overall net rent of $9.04 per square foot. This is a grocery store. It's a rather old grocery store, and it shows it. It's an old tired building, but it's still being used. There's a basement component here that we are attributing value to. I believe Mr. Reimers accepted my recommendation, and we're attributing some value to the basement.
We're in agreement with 532.
Okay, and that is due to the change in the rent amount, is it?
Correct, the overall net rent, and that's the overall net rent.
And it's going from what to what?
From $9.32 to $9.04.
Oh. And that's got that one. We were talking about the age of it. I think that started out as a movie theater, did it not?
I believe it did way back when, right? Yeah. It's the same kind of property, or same look as the building on Portage Avenue by Sharp there. Same sort of, well, except with the exception of the roof. It's long, narrow.
So next then is 431 Academy Road.
No, 375
375
Hargrave.
Oh, wait a minute, did I?
Jumped one.
Oh, there we are, sorry. I turned that one over. 375 Hargrave.
All right. File number 18-548. The applicant is Altus Group Limited. The roll number is 130528240000. The address is 375 Hargrave Street. The owner is Penguins Formal Wear, Inc. The roll year is 2019, the reference date being April 1st, 2016. The current assessed value is $965,000. I do have a recommendation to reduce that value to $899,000. With respect to this property, Mr. Chairman, if you look at page 4 of my presentation, you can see the stratification of the rents. First rent is $2.49 for 48,000 square feet, and the remaining rents for the main floor $987 and the upper floor $649. With respect to this agreement, Mr. Chairman, or I'm not sure, I believe Mr. Reimer is in agreement with this value of $899. We will use values of $11 per square foot for the main level of 5430 square feet. For the second floor, $550, which is essentially half of that for the second floor. And the basement, 4,800 square feet, I believe $1 a square foot, and with the city of Winnipeg parameters.
Okay,
Yep.
So,
thank you very much. And move on to previously mentioned 431 Academy, unless I've turned things wrong again. And that'll be our last one.
Find that. for you. File number 18-528. The applicant is Altus Group Limited. The roll number is 12060869000. The address is 431 Academy Road. The owner is Lorraine's Chocolate Shop Limited. The roll year is 2019. Reference date being April 1st, 2016. The current assessed value is $255,000. I have a recommendation to make on this property, Mr. Chairman. Reducing the overall value from $255,000 to $236,000. This property essentially, the building takes up the entire square footage of the property, or the entire footprint of the land. So there's no additional lands to this building. What we're, I believe Mr. Reimer is in agreement with 236.
Yes. I can assist Mr. McCubbin. That would be based on a total revised potential income of $20,864. And then the application of the remaining parameters is set forth in both Mr. McCubbin's and our brief.
Potential income of
20,864.
And again, Mr. Chairman, there's a basement on this property, and we're attributing value to the basement. It's a low ceiling height situation, and we're attributing some value to the basement.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You might have been under the 4-minute mark there.
Extended my part.
It depends on if you're going at the speed of light.
Better to be safe.